is someone that none of you have had a chance to meet yet. This is our new little wildlife ambassador. She is a Peregrine Falcon, and she has a bit of an interesting story. She came out of a captive breeding program. Huh, sweetie? She came out of a captive breeding program, so she's not from the wild. Unfortunately, she has some genetic problems, which makes her not suitable for falconry and also not suitable for going back in the wild. Oh, I know, that's just my hand. That's just my hand, sweetie. Not going back to the wild. She is incredibly nearsighted. We have our video camera set up, taking these videos, and it's okay, sweetie. Taking these videos, and I can promise you, the camera would be nothing but a tiny blur to her. She's very, very, very nearsighted. The breeder that had her noticed that she was, couldn't fly normally. She'd hit walls and stuff in her chambers, and she has a real hard time, finding food if it's on the ground, and she has a hard time, finding her bath pan, and so basically, she can see enough to sit on a perch and recover onto a perch, but she can't feed herself.
The breeders.
And so the breeder
was great about hand feeding her, and
yeah, he took really good care of her, because she is handicapped. Oh, sweet girl. She's a little handicapped, and really the choices are either she becomes a wildlife ambassador and used as an educational animal, or since she can't go to the wild, can't be used for falconry, she would have to be euthanized.
Okay.
And so the breeder and I talked to me about her, and I says, well, let's give her a chance. Let's see how she does. She did her very, very first program yesterday. Yes, you're just going to flap those pretty wings. She says, I haven't been outside to get my exercise yet today. And so she did very well, even though, like I said, everything's shadowy and, distorted for her. So I've taken on a new role in my life. Not only am I the husband to this beautiful young lady, and father and grandfather, and wildlife rescuer and wildlife educator, I have now taken on the role as the seeing eye person for a falcon. And so with her limited vision, she takes extra special care. Don't you? Yes, you take special care, because you don't know, huh? You don't know what all this stuff is. Oh yes, she's such a good girl. So she's still, like I said, she's only been with us a very short time. She's still figuring things out and figuring out who I am and what's going on. But she's really doing remarkably well. And most of you know that we've had a little bit of a contest going on. Name our new wildlife ambassador. Yes, that's a sweet girl. A falcon like this, they love to fly, they love to soar. Oh, pretty, pretty girl. And she will never, ever be able to do that ever again in her entire life. She'll never know what it feels like to be thousands of feet in the sky and dive at 200 miles an hour, because she just doesn't see well enough to be able to accomplish that. In captivity, she will never go hungry. She'll never know hunger. She'll never know cold. She'll never have to sit out in a snowstorm in sub-zero temperatures. She will never have to worry about other predators, wanting to kill and eat her. So she will have a very safe, a very comfortable life here with us as a wildlife ambassador. And so we've had a little Name the Falcon contest, and we have chosen a name for her. And the name that we have chosen is Helen. Now, we've had great names. We had about 150 names altogether suggested for her, and just was really difficult, and we had to really consider carefully as to what we were going to name her. And so thank you everybody who sent in a name for her. But the reason we chose Helen is I have three reasons. First and foremost, certainly a childhood heroine of mine that, I read the story when I was a kid about Helen Keller, a young lady born blind, born deaf, and she took her difficulties, like I said, I don't like the word disability, she took her difficulties and she was able to go past those difficulties and become literally a role model and a teacher for every one of us. To never ever underestimate anybody's, because we all, even though we have different weaknesses, but we also have very, very different strengths. And so she became an amazing role model and teacher, just like little Helen here is going to be a wonderful, wonderful wildlife ambassador to educate people about the wildlife and about the peregrine falcon. And so her life is going to be very, very rich as a teacher, educating the public. And so that's one of the reasons we named her Helen. The second reason we named her Helen is because of my grandmother was named Helen. Now my grandmother, for those of you who have read my book, will remember that my grandmother literally saved my life. I have my own personal difficulty. I'm severely dyslexic, and when I was a child, it was commonly believed that I would never learn to read, never learn to write, and that I would have absolutely no potential for success in my life. And of course that's completely not true. And in today's world, we know what being dyslexic is, and we know it's nothing more than the brain function or processes information differently. And so now we have children who are dyslexic, but we can give them the education that they need. But back in the 50s, we didn't have that. And so my grandmother, one day, whoop, we'll get it cleaned up in a minute. You pooped on the carpet, kiddo. My grandmother, who was a retired school teacher, one day she saw my report card, and it was all D's and F's because I was a really, really terrible student, being dyslexic. And my grandmother drugged me in the house and sat me down and asked what this is, and I says, well, that's my report card. And my grandmother says, no, what are these grades? And I says, well, everybody says I'm dumb, and this is the best I can do. And my grandmother, and you have to understand, this little tiny Iowa farm girl basically looked at me with such anger. And my grandmother looked me in the eye and says, I know you. And I know you're every bit as smart as your brother and sister, maybe even more so. And every day after school, you're coming to my house. And every day after school, I had to go to Grandma's house. And every day after school, we had to do reading and writing and flashcards and math. And my grandmother taught me how to read. And she taught me how to write. And my grandmother would take me to the library. We could check out books on animals. And because of my grandmother, that's where my love for birds started out. And so if you haven't had a chance to ever read my book, you can go to the website. My book's called Healer of Angels. And if you ever want a wonderful book on wildlife rescue stories and the wisdom of grandparents, I know, Helen, you're such a good girl. That's a very, very fun read. So, Helen Keller, my grandmother Helen, and I have one more Helen in my life that's so very, very important to me, and that is I have the sweetest and most beautiful, wonderful granddaughter named Helen. And she was named after her grandmother, her great-grandmother, my grandmother, Helen. And so I have basically 3 reasons to call her Helen. I think that would be very, very, very appropriate. And so that's going to be her name. Her name is going to be Helen. And so, Wildlife Ambassador Helen. Now, for everyone that wrote in and suggested the name Helen, I do a lot of wildlife photography, and I'm going to take a nice portrait of her, and then I do my own photography, I do my own processing, and for everyone that named Helen, if you sent me a mailing address, then I will send you a photograph of Helen here, a nice 8.5 by 11 portrait of her as a thank you. And please, everyone, thank you for everything that you've done for us. You guys have been absolutely wonderful this year. Every one of you made a huge difference with the Wildlife Foundation. All of the gifts, all of the food for the animals, all of the donations, you guys have been amazing. So, our new falcon, her name is going to be Helen, and we're very, very excited. And continue watching videos, and you'll get to see her as she develops and as she continues to become a wildlife ambassador for us. Are you ready to go to your perch, sweetie? Are you ready? Ready to go to your perch, pretty girl? And right now, because Helen's our newest one, she needs lots of attention to help get her acclimated to everything. And so Helen gets to come upstairs and live in the living room with us. And so we bring her, and this is where she spends the night. There's my pretty girl. There you go. There's my pretty Helen. Oh, there you go, sweetie. There's my pretty girl. Yes, you are. Is that better? So she gets to hang out with the family and watch TV and put up with the silly dog and get used to lots of activities, because she will be doing a lot of programs in auditoriums with 500 screaming kids. And so she's got a really interesting life ahead of her, and I think she's going to be a very, very good wildlife ambassador for us. So, everyone, here's Helen. Okay. Here you go, pretty girl. That's off of here. There you are. There's your breakfast. Yeah, there's your breakfast, sweetie. Isn't she beautiful? Now this is the Peregrine Falcon. This is the Enoch peregrine, which is the endangered species. And this one has a little problem. That's why she's with me. She's horribly nearsighted. She's almost blind. And so she cannot see well enough to go back to the wild. And so, but you can see those beautiful black eyes that she has, that all falcons have. Now again, the stripe on the Peregrine Falcon covers the whole head. But look at these pointy wings. I know, sweetie. Here's my girl. Those pointy wings, quick wing beats. Again, what you're looking at is the fastest animal that's lived on the planet. How did we determine that she was almost blind? Well, because she cannot see food more than, if it's any further than 3 feet away from her, she can't find it. And so I could set a dead quail or something 4 feet away, she'll never find it.
What caused it?
Well, it's genetic. It's genetic with her. And for those of you who taking a close look, you can see her talons curve downward, except that one it curves upward. And that's a genetic defect. So she's kind of a genetic mess. Yes, you are, but you're beautiful anyway. And you're really a good little girl. You know, she's looking at all of you folks, but she just sees a blur. So she doesn't know who you are or what you're doing. So she's just kind of a blurry little thing. See blurs. Sweetie, it's okay.
There's more ice.
Yeah.
It's just me, sweetheart. And she's mostly blind. And she's from a captive breeding program. Basically, the breeder called me up and says, I got a peregrine that can never be allowed to fly because it's mostly blind. Do you need an extra bird for your program? So I says, no, I really don't. He says, well, we just have to euthanize her.
So you said, okay.
Bring her over.
Yes.
We'll take her in.
She knows your voice. She's
Hi,
like,
baby
oh, are you
girl."
going to come get me?
Look how cute.
Yeah, she's my little buddy.